Lila and I had been inseparable for as long as I could remember. We met in second grade, bonding over a shared love for storytelling and the kind of laughter that leaves you breathless. By high school, her home had become my second home, a haven where I could escape the chaos of my own family. Lila's family, especially her dad, Mr. Carter, always made me feel welcome. Mr. Carter was the kind of dad everyone wished they had. He was charismatic, always cracking jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in our lives. While my own father was distant, Mr. Carter made an effort to ask about my school projects, my dreams, and the little things that seemed insignificant to everyone else. To me, he wasn't just Lila's dad, he was a surrogate father figure. Their house was warm and inviting, with the faint smell of fresh-baked cookies often wafting through the air. It was the kind of place where time slowed down, and you felt safe. Lila and I would spend hours sprawled on her bedroom floor, talking about boys, school drama, and our plans for the future. Everything felt simple and perfect when I was there. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lila invited me over for what I assumed would be another day of carefree chatter and binge-watching our favorite TV shows. When I arrived, the house was quieter than usual. Lila greeted me at the door, her hands full of bags from a recent shopping trip. "I need to run to the store," she said, frowning. "Mom forgot the baking powder for her cake. Can you hang out here for a bit? I'll be back in 20 minutes, tops." I shrugged and agreed. It wasn't unusual for me to hang out alone at their house, but as Lila dashed out the door, leaving me alone with Mr. Carter, a strange sense of unease crept in. I shook it off, attributing it to the silence that filled the space without Lila's laughter. Mr. Carter was sitting in the living room, a book in hand. When he noticed me standing awkwardly in the doorway, he smiled and gestured for me to sit. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, his tone as friendly as ever. I sat on the couch, trying to ignore the odd tension building in my chest. As we made small talk, I couldn't help but notice his eyes linger a little too long on me. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to make me shift uncomfortably in my seat. His compliments, though polite on the surface, began to feel personal, almost intimate. "You've grown into a stunning young woman," he said, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. My smile faltered, but I quickly recovered, not wanting to seem rude. The atmosphere felt heavier now, the warmth of their home suddenly tinged with something unfamiliar. I glanced at the clock, silently willing Lila to return quickly. In that moment, I felt the first crack in the perfect image I'd built of this family. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching into what felt like an eternity. Mr. Carter's presence, once comforting, now seemed to fill the room with a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to distract myself, fiddling with my phone and scrolling through meaningless updates, but the awareness of his gaze made it hard to focus. "Do you want something to drink?" he asked, his voice light but his tone too deliberate. "There's lemonade in the fridge." I nodded, eager for a moment away from the thickening tension. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of lemonade and took a deep breath. Maybe I was overreacting. He was just being polite, right? I told myself I was imagining things, clinging to the image of the kind, attentive father I had always known. But when I returned to the living room, his demeanor had shifted. He patted the seat next to him on the couch, his smile widening. "Come sit," he said, his tone more insistent than inviting. Reluctantly, I sat at the far edge of the couch, keeping a careful distance. "So, what's been going on with you?" he asked, leaning forward. His questions were innocent enough. How was school? What were my plans for college? But his attention felt too focused, his compliments too specific. "You've really grown up," he said, his eyes scanning me in a way that made my stomach twist. "You're not a little girl anymore." I forced a laugh, hoping it would mask my discomfort. "Well, time does that," I replied, avoiding his gaze. He shifted closer, his movement subtle but deliberate. "You know, you're special," he said softly, his voice dropping. "You've always been different from other girls your age. More mature, more interesting." My heart raced as alarm bells sounded in my mind. I gripped my glass tightly, my knuckles whitening. The air seemed thicker now, the walls of the cozy living room closing in. "I should probably check on Lila," I blurted, standing abruptly. "She's been gone for a while." He didn't move but watched me with an expression I couldn't read, part amusement, part something darker. "She'll be back soon," he said casually, leaning back into the couch. "You're so quick to run away." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I'd never experienced before. My mind raced, searching for an exit that wouldn't make the situation worse. "I just remembered I left something in my bag," I said quickly, retreating toward the hallway. He didn't stop me, but his eyes followed me, making my skin crawl. The moment I was out of sight, I grabbed my phone and texted Lila, "When are you coming back?" My fingers trembled as I hit send. The response came immediately. 5 minutes. "Why? Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, my chest tight. No, everything wasn't okay. But I wasn't ready to explain why. By the time Lila returned, I was already at the edge of my composure, my thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and dread. When she burst through the door, carrying a small grocery bag and an apology for taking so long, I forced a smile, my voice tight as I said, "No worries." I didn't even notice the time. But I had noticed, every excruciating second. Lila's presence immediately lightened the room, her chatter filling the air with a familiarity I desperately clung to. I laughed at her jokes and nodded in all the right places, but inside, I felt hollow. Every glance in Mr. Carter's direction sent my stomach twisting. He acted as if nothing had happened, his tone light and casual as he teased Lila about forgetting the baking powder. I wanted to tell her what had transpired in her absence, but the words refused to form. How could I? What if she didn't believe me? What if she turned on me, or, worse, what if I destroyed her image of the father she adored? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I excused myself earlier than usual, mumbling something about needing to finish homework. Lila looked disappointed but didn't press, and Mr. Carter's parting smile felt like a silent warning. Once I was home, the weight of the encounter finally crushed me. I locked myself in my room and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. My mind replayed every detail, his words, his tone, the way he looked at me. Was I overreacting? Was it all in my head? The uncertainty gnawed at me. Mr. Carter had always been kind, always so welcoming. Could I have misinterpreted his actions? Yet the unease I felt was undeniable, as if my instincts were screaming at me to recognize the danger. 4 days, I avoided Lila. Her calls went unanswered, her texts left unread. I couldn't bring myself to face her, to sit in the same room as her father and pretend nothing had changed. She finally cornered me at school, her expression a mix of confusion and hurt. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why have you been ignoring me?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. "I've just been busy," I lied, my voice unconvincing. "Busy," she repeated, her brows knitting together. "You've never been too busy for me before." Tears stung my eyes as I grappled with my decision. Telling her the truth felt like detonating a bomb, but keeping it hidden felt like drowning under its weight. "Lila, I started, my voice breaking." "What is it?" she pressed, her concern evident. I swallowed hard, the words sitting heavy on my tongue. This was the moment I had been dreading. If I told her, nothing would ever be the same. But if I didn't, I knew I would carry this secret alone, its burden only growing heavier. Finally, I whispered, "It's about your dad." Lila's face froze, her eyes widening with a mixture of confusion and alarm. "My dad?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. "Something happened when you left me alone with him," I said, my words shaky but firm. "I didn't know how to tell you, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." Her expression shifted rapidly, from disbelief to anger, then back to confusion. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice cracking. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I recounted the incident. I told her about the way he looked at me, the comments he made, and the unease that had gripped me in his presence. I avoided exaggeration, sticking to the facts, but each word felt like a betrayal of the trust we had built over years of friendship. When I finished, silence enveloped us. Lila stared at the ground, her jaw clenched. "Are you sure?" she finally asked, her voice quiet, almost pleading. The question stung, but I understood her reluctance. "I wouldn't lie about something like this," I said softly, my voice steady. "You know me, Lila. You know I wouldn't." She stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. "I don't know what to think," she muttered. "This is my dad. He wouldn't," her voice faltered, and she looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," I admitted. "I didn't want to hurt you or ruin our friendship. But I couldn't keep avoiding you. You deserve to know." Lila sat down, burying her face in her hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she lifted her head, her eyes red but resolute. "I need to talk to him," she said. The confrontation happened that evening. Lila called me afterward, her voice heavy with the weight of her emotions. "I asked him," she said, her words halting. "He denied it, of course, but he got defensive. Too defensive." I could hear the pain in her voice, and it broke my heart. "I'm so sorry, Lila," I said. "I never wanted to put you in this position." "It's not your fault," she replied quickly. I don't know what to do now. I can't look at him the same way." Over the following weeks, Lila and I leaned on each other, navigating the complicated aftermath together. She began to see cracks in the image of her father that she had once idolized, and though it hurt, it also brought clarity. Our friendship changed after that day, deeper, more honest. We learned to trust each other in ways we hadn't before. I learned to trust myself, to listen to my instincts, and to speak out when something felt wrong. In the end, the betrayal didn't define us. What mattered was how we chose to move forward, together, stronger than ever.